The world was watching. Two of the most powerful and most hostile nations on the planet sat down in the heart of South Asia, and then they walked away. No deal, no agreement, no peace. Just silence, broken promises, and a region left wondering what comes next. You are about to hear what really happened behind those closed doors in Pakistan, why these talks collapsed before they even had a chance to succeed, and what this failure means for the future of the Middle East, and possibly the entire world. Do not go anywhere. This is a story that affects every single one of us. Welcome back to Foxy Global News, the channel that brings you the stories that matter, without the spin, without the delay, and without the filter. If you are new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now and turn on the bell so you never miss a breaking update. We cover global politics, international diplomacy, and the events that shape our world every single day. Today, we are diving deep into one of the most significant diplomatic failures of the year. High-level talks between the United States and Iran have just concluded in Pakistan, and sources on the ground confirm that the two sides have walked away with absolutely nothing to show for it. No peace framework, no interim agreement, no goodwill gesture, just tension, mistrust, and a diplomatic situation that is arguably more dangerous now than it was before the talks began. Let's break down exactly what happened, how we got here, and what the fallout means for the region and the rest of the world. To understand why these talks failed, we first need to go back and understand why Pakistan was chosen as the location in the first place. Pakistan has historically maintained a delicate but important relationship with both Washington and Tehran. It shares a long border with Iran, receives significant American aid and military cooperation, and has spent decades trying to walk the tightrope between the two rival powers. In theory, it was the perfect neutral ground, a country with diplomatic channels open to both sides, a government willing to play host, and a geographic position that made it symbolically significant. The choice of Pakistan sent a message. Both the United States and Iran were at least willing to show up. And they did show up. Senior American officials arrived in Islamabad with what sources described as a structured agenda focused on three core issues: Iran's nuclear program, regional proxy conflicts, and the question of sanctions relief. The American side reportedly came prepared with a phased proposal. Iran would agree to a temporary freeze on uranium enrichment beyond a certain threshold, and in exchange, the United States would ease a limited set of economic sanctions while keeping the broader sanctions architecture intact. It was not a grand bargain. It was a small step, a confidence-building measure designed to test whether dialogue was even possible. Iran's delegation, however, reportedly arrived with a fundamentally different set of expectations. Tehran's position, according to multiple regional sources, was that any meaningful progress required the United States to first acknowledge what Iran calls the illegality of the maximum pressure campaign launched under the previous American administration. Iran wanted not just sanctions relief, it wanted a formal admission that the sanctions themselves were unjust. That is not a technical negotiating point. That is a political demand, and it was one that the American side was never going to accept, at least not in the format of a preliminary dialogue session. Within the first day of talks, the gap between the two positions became clear. The Americans were talking about incremental steps. The Iranians were talking about fundamental principles. These are two entirely different conversations, and having them in the same room does not make them compatible. Pakistani mediators reportedly worked through the night trying to find common language, some form of words that both sides could use to at least declare the talks productive and buy more time for further negotiation. But by the second day, it was clear that no such language existed. There is also a broader context that made this failure almost inevitable. Iran is currently navigating an extraordinarily complex internal political environment. The government in Tehran is under pressure from hardline factions that view any engagement with Washington as a form of surrender. Every concession that Iranian negotiators might offer at the table becomes a liability back home. The political cost of appearing to soften on America is enormous, and the Iranian delegation was well aware that every word they spoke in Islamabad would be scrutinized, weaponized, and used against them by domestic opponents the moment they landed back in Tehran. On the American side, the pressure is different but equally real. Washington is dealing with a deeply divided political landscape, a Congress that remains broadly skeptical of any agreement with Iran, and a regional alliance structure, particularly with Israel and Saudi Arabia, that views diplomatic engagement with Tehran as a potential betrayal. Any deal that looks too favorable to Iran risks triggering a political firestorm in Washington and a diplomatic crisis with America's closest Middle Eastern allies. The American negotiators, like their Iranian counterparts, were not operating in a vacuum. They were operating inside a web of constraints that made genuine flexibility nearly impossible. What makes this failure particularly significant is not just what was not achieved. It is what it signals going forward. The collapse of the Pakistan talks removes one of the last remaining diplomatic off-ramps from a trajectory that is pointing toward escalation. Iran continues to advance its nuclear capabilities. American and Israeli military planners continue to war-game scenarios for a potential strike on Iranian facilities. And the proxy conflicts that Iran funds and directs, in Yemen, in Lebanon, in Iraq, in Syria, continue to destabilize the region and drag in outside powers. Pakistan itself is now in an awkward position. Islamabad invested significant diplomatic capital in hosting these talks. Pakistani officials had hoped that a successful mediation would boost the country's international standing at a time when it is dealing with serious economic pressures and its own complicated relationship with the international community. Instead, Pakistan now has to manage the fallout of a high-profile diplomatic failure on its own soil, with both Washington and Tehran potentially frustrated by the outcome in ways that could affect their respective relationships with Islamabad. There are also regional implications that extend far beyond Pakistan's borders. Gulf states are watching closely. Saudi Arabia, which has its own complex dynamic with Iran following the Chinese-brokered normalization talks of recent years, will be calculating what this failure means for its own security posture. Turkey, which has tried to position itself as a diplomatic bridge in multiple regional conflicts, will be watching for opportunities. And Russia and China, both of which have strategic interests in keeping American-Iranian tensions high enough to distract Washington, but not so high that the region explodes, will be drawing their own conclusions. Perhaps the most immediate question is what happens to Iran's nuclear program now. The International Atomic Energy Agency has consistently reported that Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium continues to grow, that its centrifuge capacity continues to expand, and that the time it would take Tehran to produce enough fissile material for a nuclear device, if it chose to do so, continues to shrink. With talks now collapsed, there is no diplomatic mechanism in place to slow that process. The window for a negotiated solution to the nuclear question is not closing. It has arguably already closed, at least for the near term. This is a moment that history will look back on. Two nations had a chance, a small, imperfect, but real chance, to step back from the edge. And they did not take it. Whether that failure was the result of bad faith, bad timing, domestic political constraints, or simply the depth of a mistrust that has been building for over 4 decades, the result is the same. The talks are over. The deal is dead, and the world is a more dangerous place tonight than it was yesterday. We will continue to track this story closely here at Foxy Global News. There will be more developments. There always are. And when they happen, you will hear about them here first. If you found this breakdown valuable, Please give this video a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs to understand what is happening in the world right now, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think diplomacy between the US and Iran is still possible? Or has this moment permanently changed the course of events? Let us know. And if you are not yet subscribed to Foxy Global News, now is the time. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and stay connected to the news that matters. We will see you in the next one.